Hi everyone, this is the IGCSE Human Biology paper. This is from May-June 2022, and this is paper 2. So I've uploaded paper 1 previously, and I'll just link that in the description. But yeah, today we're going to go over paper 2. So this paper 2 takes about 1 hour and 45 minutes, and you'll be tested on the whole syllabus, and the total mark for this paper is 90. All right, let's start off with the first question. Okay, question 1. The diagram shows a simple version of the human circulatory system. Okay, so it says in part A, name blood vessel X. So I'm just going to name the blood vessels that we have here. So this shape here represents the lungs, right? And this here represents the rest of the body. All right, so blood vessel X is transporting blood from the heart all the way to the lungs. And any blood vessel that leaves the heart is referred to as an artery. And for blood vessels related to the lungs, we refer to them as pulmonary. Therefore, blood vessel X would be pulmonary artery. Okay, let's look at blood vessel Y, right? Blood vessel Y is carrying blood from the lungs to the heart. So it's going to be pulmonary vein. Pulmonary vein. All right, one thing to note is that arteries would transport blood away from the heart, and veins transport blood towards the heart. And a simple way to remember this is artery starts with the letter A, and away starts with the letter A as well. Now, blood vessel Z over here is pumping blood to the rest of the body, and this is the aorta. So the aorta is the largest artery that we have. And lastly, this blood vessel over here is carrying blood from the rest of the body back to the heart. That would be the vena cava. So the vena cava is the largest vein that we have. Okay, so to answer part A, name blood vessel X, that would be pulmonary artery. All right. Okay, let's move on to part B. The box gives words about the circulatory system. Complete the sentences using words from the box. Okay, blood vessel Y transports blank blood from the blank to the left blank of the heart. Okay, let's go back up to the diagram. So blood vessel Y is this, the pulmonary vein. And the pulmonary vein is carrying blood from the lungs to the heart. And the reason why blood is being carried to the lungs in the first place is so that oxygen can diffuse into our blood, and carbon dioxide can diffuse out. Oops. So when blood contains a lot more oxygen and less carbon dioxide, we refer to it as oxygenated. So oxygenated. From the lungs, we covered that earlier, to the left blank of the heart. Okay. So this is the diagram of the heart. This would be the right-hand side. This would be the left-hand side. So it's always in reverse. The top part is the atrium. So this is the right atrium. This is the right ventricle. This would be the left atrium. This would be the left ventricle. So you can see blood vessel Y, which is the pulmonary vein, is transporting blood to the left atrium. So let's write that down. All right, the second sentence, blood vessel X transport blood from the left blank of the heart to the blank. Okay, so blood vessel Z, which is this one here, is transporting blood from the left ventricle to the rest of the body. All right, from the left ventricle of the heart to the body. Okay. Okay, part C, the diagram shows the structure of blood vessel X and blood vessel Y. So let's look back up here. Blood vessel X is a pulmonary artery, blood vessel Y is a pulmonary vein. So one is an artery and one is a vein. Let me just write that down. Artery, vein. Okay, so just a little bit of background on the arteries and vein. So arteries are carrying blood away from the heart, right? And blood is being pumped out of the heart. And that's why the blood in the arteries have higher blood pressure. And in order for your arteries to transport blood effectively, it needs to have a thick wall. And you can see that the artery has a much more thicker wall than the vein. And the reason why it's thick is so that the arteries don't burst. Another thing to notice is that the lumen of your arteries are smaller, and that's so that high blood pressure can be maintained, because you want the blood to actually be delivered to where it's supposed to go. And another difference, and you can't really see it on this diagram, is that your veins contain valves. So valves prevent backflow of blood. So let's put that together. Okay. Blood vessel X has a thicker wall, a smaller lumen, and does not contain valves. So those are the three marks. Thicker wall, smaller lumen, does not contain valves. All right, question 2. The graph shows the number of working age people at risk of developing a mental illness. A1 says, determine the year when the greatest number of women were at risk of developing a mental illness. So women are represented with a shaded bar, and the tallest bar here, the highest bar here, is at 2002. All right. Part A2, determine the year when there was the greatest difference between the number of males and the number of females at risk of developing a mental illness. So we need to look at the bars in which there are the greatest difference between them. And it looks like it's at 2005, right? So the difference is 1 million people at risk. So that is 2005. The next part, determine the ratio of females at risk of developing a mental illness in 1999 compared to 2008. Okay, so at 1999, okay, so this is 2.5, this is 2.6, this is 2.7, so this would be 2.75. Let's write that down, 2.75, so that's for 1999. Now for 2008, this is 2.5, this is 2.6. This would be 2.6. Now, in order to represent it in this form, right, n to 1, we need to divide it by the smallest number. So the smallest number of the two is 2.6. So that will give you 1 here. Let me just calculate this part. Divided by 2.6, that would be 1.06. 1.06 to 1. All right, part 4 suggests one possible reason why the number of females at risk of developing a mental illness increased from 2007 to 2008. So there are multiple reasons and multiple things that could affect a person's mental state. One of them could be perhaps they come from a low-income household or a household of low social status, and the reason why that could impact mental health is they could be constantly worrying about how to make ends meet, constantly worrying about whether or not they would have a roof over their head, on what to eat, and their kids, and their education, and so on. Another thing you can also write is domestic violence, right? So domestic violence, whether or not it's the partner or the spouse, or relatives as well, that could impact their mental health. Another thing is substance abuse. So there's different reasons that you can write here. So I'll just write perhaps could due to increase in all right. Okay, the next part. The boxes list 2 mental illnesses and some symptoms. Draw one straight line from each mental illness to a symptom of the illness. Okay, so depression would be lack of energy, and schizophrenia, that would be hallucination. So tremors would be Parkinson's. That's just for your reference. And memory loss would be Alzheimer's. All right. Okay, part C. Which combination of drugs is most likely to affect mental health? So you want to look at the drugs that play a huge role in the mind. So alcohol and heroin is definitely going to be 2 drugs that would affect the mind. So I'm just going to write an X there. Antibiotics wouldn't really affect the mind as much because they are there to kill bacteria. And paracetamol is a painkiller. So it's the drugs that you would use to, for example, treat fever or flu, which is kind of what I'm having right now. And the brand name for paracetamol would be Tylenol or Panadol. And that's something that you can buy over the counter. Okay, part D. People who use the drug cocaine often have a raised body temperature. Name 2 body structures that can help control body temperature. So there's actually quite a few that you could say here. You could say things like the brain. So for example, in the brain we have, in our hypothalamus, we have the thermoregulatory center, and that sort of detects and helps control our body temperature. So you could say the brain. You could also say the skin, and specifically the sweat glands under skin that could help lower down our body temperature by sweating. And we can even talk about the arterioles in our skin, right? So when it undergoes vasodilation, what happens is that more blood flows towards our skin, and therefore more heat is lost via radiation. And when we're really cold, our bodies undergo, or the arterioles undergo, vasoconstriction. So these are some of the body structures that help control body temperature. So here I'm just going to write brain, and we could say sweat glands. All right, the nervous system is adapted to transfer information rapidly from one part of the body to another. Complete the passage about the nervous system by giving the correct words. All right, so I'm just going to go over the reflex arc for a bit, just to do a little bit of revision. So in our sense organs, we have these things called receptors. So in this case, in this diagram, we have receptors. You would have receptors on our skin that can detect heat, right? And that would cause impulses to travel down the sensory neuron, that's a magenta. And then we would have our relay neuron that's in the central nervous system. So that's our brain and spinal cord. And then lastly, we would have the motor neuron, and that would cause the muscle or the gland to activate. In this case, it would cause the muscle to activate and to contract so that the hand can pull away. So let's make this one smaller again. A change in the external environment is detected by receptors in sense organs. So sense organs can be your skin, your nose, your taste buds, your ears, for example. These structures convert stimuli into electrical impulses, which then travel along sensory neuron. The sensory neuron that goes first to the central nervous system. So your central nervous system would be your brain and your spinal cord. The central nervous system coordinates the incoming information using relay neurons. Relay neurons. These relay neurons then transfer the electrical impulses to the motor neuron. And then that would cause the muscle or the gland to sort of activate. Okay, part B, the diagram shows the junction between two neurons. State the name of the junction between two neurons. That would be the synapse. So what essentially is happening in the synapse is that you would have an electrical impulse that would arrive and it would cause these vesicles containing the neurotransmitters. So these black dots that you see here, these are the neurotransmitters. It would cause them to be released to the synaptic cleft, this gap between the two neurons, and eventually they would bind onto the receptors here. Oops. There we go. All right, and that's what the next question is about. So describe how an impulse reaching the end of one neuron produces an impulse in the next. So what happens is that the neurotransmitter get released into the synaptic cleft diffuse. To the next neuron. So one mark for neurotransmitters and the other mark would be diffuse in the synaptic cleft. Alright, and lastly, part C. A nerve impulse travels at a speed of 120 meters per second. So this is the speed, 120 meters per second. Calculate the distance of this nerve impulse will travel in 5 minutes. So because this is given in minutes, we need to convert this into seconds. So that would be 60 times 5, that would be 300. And the formula for speed is distance over time. But we know the speed, we know the time taken. We just need to rearrange it so that distance is on one side. So it's a speed times the time. The speed is 120 meters per second, and the time is 300. And that would be, let me just calculate that. $360,000. All right.